This video is a request from a member of my Patreon. If you want to request your own video, or if you want a written fanfic for your eyes only, go check my Patreon out. Link is in the description. Some options are cheap, others not so much. In canon, MK calls Julia a butt knuckle as they're heading to the elimination ceremony. Julia realizes she's only ever said butt knuckle in a confessional, which leads to her finding out that MK has been watching everyone's confessionals and stealing everyone's stuff. She uses this against her, causing MK's elimination. You've seen what happens after that. The Hockey Bros started off the merge being eliminated by injury. Julia duked it out against multiple contestants to have the most immunities of the season, only to get screwed over by Bowie, who takes on and loses to Priya in the final two. But what if MK didn't slip up her words and exposed herself? What if Julia never managed to save herself and just got eliminated in episode 6? That's what this video is about, so sit back and stay tuned for this huge change in the story. The merge is still announced at the beginning of the episode. The first change that is immediately obvious is that without Julia's presence, Chase is less of a target on his back. Unfortunately for MK, with Wayne and Raj being a tight-knit pair, Priya and Millie having an alliance, Ripper planning to use these hiccups to his advantage, and Bowie and Emma working together, she's forced to still be Chase's partner for the challenge. I don't see MK wanting anything to do with Chase, nor do I see her risking her life to get the eggs. She would realize she needs some allies in order to not be singled out eventually. Considering the fact that she's been watching the confessionals, she'd deduct that Priya and Millie are her best bets at stable allies. Emma and Chase have their thing going on, Wayne and Raj aren't the most intelligent, Ripper and Z also aren't the brightest, and Bowie's a bit too messy and less of her vibe. I don't think MK would egg Chase on about Emma. I also don't think it would be difficult for her to get rid of him regardless of what she does. We'll just say Chase misinterprets her sarcasm for encouragement and runs off to Emma anyways. He wouldn't have a chocolate bar like Julia did, but would find some type of treat to share with Emma. MK would attempt to approach Priya and Millie for her alliance plan. Considering it's not exactly shown when or how they got their eggs, I can't exactly predict she'd find them before then. But a perfect moment for MK to gain their trust is when the cassowary attempts to attack Millie. Priya gets the idea to do the angrier bird tactic, but before she could do so, MK uses the control room from the shed she found at the dock to launch the bird into the sky and far away. It's a bit of a stretch, but it's the most MK way for her to successfully get rid of the bird. Both Priya and Millie are shocked and confused as to what happened, but MK explains what she did and how she did it. Priya does connect the dots that MK's the reason why her team did so poorly a few episodes ago, but MK takes this opportunity to apologize and suggest that they could form an alliance to make up for it. Priya is hesitant, since she doesn't know MK or really trusts her that much, but Millie wouldn't really have anything against MK since she's probably the only contestant that she's never had to write about in her journal. Priya asks MK to give her and Millie a moment to talk it over together. Priya would say they have no reason to include MK. Millie would say they have no reason to not include MK. Priya would list off a few reasons. They know nothing about her. She was on the other team, and she could be a scapegoat for a different alliance. Millie tells Priya that she knows she may consider most of the cast as competition, but they can't possibly get through the game as just the two of them, and they need to expand their alliance, even if it's by one person, to gain votes in the game. Priya would realize Millie has a point and begrudgingly agrees to allow MK into the alliance, which the latter wanted. Millie and Priya inform MK that she's in the alliance, but does apologize for not having a third egg to give her. MK tells them not to worry because she doesn't want to win this challenge anyway. Priya would ask why she wouldn't want to win a challenge, and MK would say she isn't risking her life for an egg she can't keep for some money she has a 1 in 10 chance of winning. Priya finds this unsettling, but doesn't speak on it except for in confessional. In the end, Millie still wins immunity, Emma and Chase still get back together, and Wayne and Raj are still medically evacuated for falling off of a cliff, so the outcome of the episode remains the same. MK would want to find a way to keep herself out of the line of elimination. Looking at the cast currently, Ripper is the easiest option for elimination since most of the cast already dislikes him, so I can see her trying to amplify his dislike amongst them. The best way for her to do that is encouraging his personality. So when she has the chance, MK would pull aside Ripper to egg him on and motivate him to keep being himself. Not that he'd want to change anyway, but still. Ripper does misinterpret this as genuine attraction on MK's part, even having a confessional asking if she was flirting. MK follows up with her own confessional confirming that she definitely was not flirting in the slightest. She grows concerned at the idea of Ripper thinking she's into him. When it comes to the challenge, since MK is the only new contestant here, and because I don't think she'd want to eat anything chef prepared, after seeing Millie opt out of the challenge on the first meal, MK follows in her footsteps, and the two leave before the challenge even begins. Needless to say, Priya is not happy about both of her allies leaving at the very beginning of the challenge. As they're sitting out of the challenge, MK would try to ensure her place in the alliance by talking to Millie. She'd ask her if she's sure Priya will be fine after they both left. Millie would insist Priya got this. MK would ask if she's sure, because Priya seemed pretty upset. Millie would ask MK if she thinks so, and MK would warn Millie to be a bit more mindful of Priya going forward, insisting they have to try harder in the next challenge. Millie has a confessional thinking MK may have a point, as she hasn't exactly been the most active in challenges, and she could be letting Priya down. MK reveals in her own confessional that she couldn't care less about Millie and Priya's friendship, but the more she can look through their confessionals, the sooner she can find something useful to her game, and she needs to make it seem like she cares so they can't catch on to her. With the absence of Julia, there's a good chance Z could do better than he does in canon. But one, anyone could explain milk to him since he asked where it came from, so he could still get taken out how he does, and two, even if he doesn't, I can't see him matching Ripper's dedication, even at the tapeworm part. In the end, Ripper manages to get immunity now that Julia isn't here. He'd get cocky and flaunt his victory in front of everyone else, and then flex in front of MK, trying to impress her now that he won something. MK has a confessional, just gagging. This vote is interesting, because with both public enemies out of the way, one eliminated and one immune, the votes scatter a bit. Emma is voting for Chase for sure. Bowie had a confessional implying that he voted for Millie and Cannon, but it can't really apply here considering two people left the challenge comfortably, and he could likely vote for MK as well. Priya would likely still vote Millie to scare her, since I imagine she'd be more affected by Millie leaving the challenge than MK. Ripper supposedly voted Millie and Cannon, and I lack a reason for him not to do so here. The possible canonical votes for Ripper are Chase, Millie, Julia, and Z, leaving Chase, Millie, MK, and Z's votes up for debate. Millie and MK are guaranteed voting together due to their alliance. I want to imagine they'd probably target Chase, since M is guaranteed voting for him. And since they're assuming Priya votes with them as well, that's 4 votes on Chase. Bowie might still want to cut Millie, as even though he could target MK, I imagine he'd view Millie as more of a threat due to her public alliance with Priya. Z's vote could very well land on Chase, for no good reason other than that's what the majority is choosing. This leaves Chase's vote on Millie, since he was delusional enough to not target Emma. So to recap, votes on Millie are Bowie, Chase, Priya, and Ripper. Votes on Chase are Millie, MK, Emma, and Z. This leads to a tie, but luckily for Millie, since the tiebreaker is most immunity wins, and she won the previous immunity challenge, Chase is guaranteed elimination. Emma rejoices over Chase's elimination, who puts up a front saying he doesn't need her anyway, but quickly backtracking by saying if she wants to get back together, he'll always be available to her. He leaves, being fully convinced that he did nothing wrong and didn't deserve to be eliminated. Priya would be training Millie and MK would quickly explain in a confessional that she's only putting up with this to gain their trust. She doesn't plan on actually using any of it. Bowie would convince Emma to really focus on the game now that Chase is absent, and with Priya, MK, and Millie being a trio, he'd know that the rest of them have to work together if they want any chance of survival. The two would attempt to convince Ripper to join their alliance, who's hesitant to work against MK, but only agrees after making them promise they won't target her specifically. Ripper has a confessional saying he wouldn't want to upset the ladies. MK follows with another confessional of nothing but gagging. This leads to the same scenario of both alliances trying to convince Z to join them. MK convinces Millie and Priya that one more number gives them the majority, and Bowie obviously planned a four-person alliance from the start. Z obviously plans to bring them all together against Chris. When it comes to the challenge, Millie and MK would be trying harder as they planned the episode prior. Except MK obviously would still want to lose on purpose just to stay out of line for elimination. When encountering the flying fish, Emma and Bowie do the strategy Chase does in canon, this time suggested by a more challenge-oriented Emma. In canon, she practically locked in after Chase's elimination, so it's safe to say that could still happen here. Seeing this happen with Emma and Bowie, Ripper would approach MK and attempt to protect her, blocking the fish from hitting her. MK is annoyed at first, until she realizes she can use Ripper as a meat shield for the challenge since he's willing. After all, if someone's offering to help her, who is she to refuse? When encountering the bears, Ripper tries to fight one to impress MK, only to get completely demolished as MK walks right past him to move on with the challenge. Most things either stay the same or don't change drastically enough to mention until they fall down the waterfall. Ripper basically takes Julia's place as the punching bag for the crocodiles. Nothing too important of note happens during the geysers apart from Bowie being far in the lead. With a lack of Julia, and neither MK nor Ripper sharing her physical abilities, Bowie has an easy path to immunity from this point onwards. So Bowie, Emma, and Ripper agree on eliminating Priya, and Millie, Priya, and MK agree on eliminating Emma. Unfortunately, neither plans go through because Z tries to unite everyone against Chris, only for it to backfire in a revote, and Z gets eliminated. The introduction remains the same with one exception. Priya wouldn't carry Millie, solely because MK is also there, and while she wouldn't want to force MK to carry her, she'd use the excuse that it wouldn't be fair to MK if she only carried Millie, and she can't carry them both at the same time. This at least reserves a little bit of her strength going into the challenge. When it comes to the challenge, many things change. For starters, Bowie wouldn't jump off for the phone of confessionals now that MK still has it. The first temptation was the lumberjack breakfast. Everyone almost jumps for it, but nobody does. It's thrown into the water, never to be seen again. Nobody jumps when it comes to the burgers and fries either. Everyone is shocked by Ripper's self-control, but he reveals in confessional that he has to ensure either he or MK is safe from elimination, so he'll last as long as he needs to for that to work. MK, once again, gags in confessional. In this episode, Priya brings up Millie's notebook, which is what causes MK to remember the confessionals Millie had about writing in her notebook. She decides to keep this in mind for future use. Emma canonically becomes a much angrier version of herself when starved, and knowing what we do about Ripper, I can see him being the same way. So Emma's complaining would drive him crazy, and he'd attempt to shout back to shut her up. This causes a big argument between the two, which Bowie is disappointed in because he's tried so hard for the three of them to remain aligned. Nobody falls, but a dent is made in the game. After Millie tries to get Priya help from Chris, he offers $10,000 for anyone to step off of their pole. And I believe this is when Bowie quits. He has a confessional admitting he has no doubt he could win the season, but if he doesn't, he at least makes something from it. And if he does, that $1,010,000 on his name, so he can't argue with that. Priya eventually falls off of her pole after hallucinating a talking glass of water. By this point, MK decides to just jump off as well, since Priya wouldn't nag her for jumping off when she fell first. Ripper promises to avenge her in the challenge, which she just responds with whatever and swims to shore. We're left with Emma, Millie, and Ripper. When the pizza option comes up, Ripper fights every ounce of his being to jump off, as well as Emma. Of course, the two drool over the idea of getting the pizza. Ripper is hanging on by a thread, while Emma just screams in frustration. Millie would start to think of how to end the challenge, since she's been on the pole all day and doesn't even care about winning anymore. The biggest threat of the opposing alliance in her eyes is Emma, so if she makes sure Emma loses, they can vote her off. So she makes the bold decision of jumping at Emma and knocking her off her pole. This means Ripper once again wins immunity, which expands his ego once more, and he quickly jumps off of his pole and steals the pizza from Chef. Priya would still be proud of Millie for her quick thinking and knowing who to take out for the vote, and the two of them plus MK vote for Emma for obvious reasons. Bowie and Emma agree on eliminating MK and expect Ripper to vote with them. However, after his argument with Emma and his devotion to MK, Ripper decides to target Emma instead. Emma would be frustrated to learn she was eliminated, and Bowie as well, because that means he's in the minority now. Ripper gloats in Emma's face, which causes her to launch at him in full rage. Chef pulls her off of him and walks her to the dock, where she gets taken by the drone. At the end of the episode, Ripper's horrific smell forces Bowie out of the guy's cabin and to the girl's cabin on the empty side where none of them sleep. However, before he walked in, he overheard a conversation between MK and Millie. MK chooses to confront Millie about her notebook in an attempt to blackmail her. With the notebook in MK's hands, Millie has no choice but to agree. Unfortunately, she and MK aren't the only ones with this knowledge now, but Bowie keeps this to himself for now, ending off with a confessional saying this is exactly what he needed to save himself. Millie and Priya still make each other friendship bracelets. Only Millie is more nervous and fidgety around Priya. Ripper expresses his annoyance by their friendship and says he has a girl to go make out with. Of course, both of them are confused, wondering what girl could possibly want to be with him. Ripper approaches MK in full confidence, talking about their relationship. This is when MK decides to tell him there's nothing between them, and there never was. However, he only misinterprets this as her playing hard to get, so he promises to continue chasing her. MK has her first genuine confessional complaining about Ripper and his awful personality, saying now that she's in a guaranteed majority, he can go home next. One thing I forgot to mention throughout the video is that MK would continue to steal items from the others, specifically those that were on the trout, so she can sell them online. She ends up hiding Millie's notebook with said stuff, so when Bowie goes searching for Millie's notebook to use to his advantage, he'd also stumble across everything else MK stole, but keeps quiet for now, thinking he knows exactly when to expose her. I'm not going to focus on the points of the challenge much, more so the interactions since they're the most important parts of this episode. Bowie and Ripper would work alone. Millie, Priya, and MK would work together, but there would be a very obvious disconnect between Priya and the other two, which she notices and grows upset over time. The girls manage to end up splitting off of each other, with MK being taken by a now extra-motivated Ripper, Priya getting snatched by a manipulative Bowie, and Millie being left to wonder where her alliance partners went. With MK and Ripper, MK grows annoyed by the latter's new attitude towards her. He tends to be more demanding while also practically worshipping her. It gets to the point where MK actually yells at him to tell him that they aren't together, they weren't together, and they will never be together. This crushes Ripper, but he runs off because he refuses to cry on camera. MK isn't liking the guilt she's feeling, even voicing it in confessional, because she knows she isn't really in the wrong. Or is she? With Bowie and Priya, Bowie warns Priya that her alliance mates are hiding something from her. She would admit they seemed off today, but she doubts they plan on betraying her. Bowie insists it's not that, but in order for her to know what he's talking about, she has to read Millie's notebook. He hands it to her. Priya refuses, insisting it's personal to Millie, and she wouldn't want to invade in her privacy. Of course, she isn't known for being good at resisting temptation and gives in to reading Millie's notebook. What she reads is definitely not what she was expecting, nor what she liked. She ends up in tears by the end of it. She throws the notebook at Bowie, insisting he wrote the stuff and is trying to mess with her. Bowie knew she might resort to this, which is why he also stole MK's phone of confessionals, showing it to Priya. This is hard, cold proof. Priya can't deny this now. Millie really did write those things in the notebook. Regarding the phone of confessionals, Priya is informed by Bowie that Millie has been watching the confessionals, as well as stealing everyone's stuff. Priya asks Bowie why he's telling her this, and he insists it's because he wants her to know who she's really aligning herself with, and they can't allow them to win the game in this manner. Priya asks him what they're supposed to do about this, and Bowie tells her they only have one method. It's 5 votes total. With the 2 of them, they only need Ripper's vote to seal the fate of one of the girls. Bowie leaves it to Priya to decide which of the 2 they eliminate. Priya really has to think about this. When the girls reunite, they all seem off. Priya is now upset with her lying alliance partners. MK feels unwanted remorse over breaking Ripper's heart, and Millie is unsure of what to think about the mood change of both of them. For what I can say about the challenge itself, most things remain the same, with Bowie getting his ass beat by a Canadian goose, and the girls battling crocodiles and bears, and all losing their phones in the process. Which means by default, Ripper ends up winning yet another immunity. It may seem like a stretch, but if you really think about it, MK and Ripper are the only ones likely to not lose their phones, and it's not like MK is in the best mindset at the moment, while Ripper is actually even more motivated after the breakup. Priya does have conflicting feelings about Millie after the latter saved her life. At the elimination ceremony, Bowie attempts to expose MK for stealing everyone's stuff and seeing their confessionals. Millie would believe this, since it would make sense how she found out about Millie's journal, but Ripper is still a bit unconvinced. However, Priya backs Bowie up, saying she knows everything because he told him. Millie tries to deflect, but Priya shares that she also knows about the contents of Millie's journal, saying she trusted her and carried her throughout the game just to be treated so poorly, and she's extremely hurt by Millie. The guilt that washes over Millie is massive. When it comes to the overall vote, MK votes Millie in the hopes that Priya does as well. Millie even votes herself out of shame, thinking she doesn't deserve to be here after the whole journal thing. However, Bowie, Priya, and Ripper vote for MK, taking her out of the game. Bowie explains in a confessional that it would be nice to have a confessional knowing there isn't someone on the cast watching it. Ripper has a confessional admitting he let his emotions outweigh everything else to eliminate MK. And in canon, Priya has a line saying she wouldn't vote off the person that saved her life. She repeats that here, but this time adds, "yet," at the end, clarifying that Millie is in fact her next target regardless of if she saves her life again or not. In the end, MK leaves feeling slightly guilty towards Millie, insanely guilty towards Ripper, and just overall done with the game. She had a good run, but it all came crashing down in the end. The episode begins without Millie and Priya dressing up as a super alliance, and instead Priya training for the upcoming challenge by herself. Right now, she's against everyone. Millie lied to her, Ripper used her as a human shield, and she knows Bowie only did what he did to save his own skin. She can only look out for herself. Millie would be completely distraught, going through her notebook in shame as she realizes she fucked up her alliance because of it. But as she gets to the end, she realizes the last page was ripped out of it. The page of her realizing that Priya is a great friend, and she no longer wants to be judgmental. She knows why it's gone, but she wants to find it, assuming it's not destroyed. Ripper is also distraught, but he takes it out with food and failed training. He's eventually approached by Bowie, who just says, "You're welcome." Ripper questions this, but Bowie says with the majority alliance gone, they can guarantee themselves the finale spots. Ripper asks Bowie why he wants to go to the end with him. Bowie makes up something about respecting his macho and thinking he deserves a finale spot more than anyone. But in a confessional, he admits it's because he knows Millie would never vote for Priya, and Priya is the only big threat right now. Regardless, Ripper's ego is stroked and he agrees to the deal. Once again, I'm not going to get too into detail about the challenge, but more so the interactions. Bowie and Ripper spend the episode working together, while Millie follows Priya around, trying to beg for her forgiveness. Bowie and Ripper practically go through what Bowie and Julia go through. The only exception being that Bowie wouldn't be sabotaging Ripper and instead would actually try to help him, only to become a victim to every obstacle. Ripper gets the most tokens between the two, and is in the lead as they exit the cave. Millie spends the episode aiding Priya and saving her from danger every time. Priya is very resistant to forgiveness, and although the challenge ends with Millie allowing Priya to win immunity due to the monster, Priya is still hesitant to forgive her. Millie finds the last page to her notebook before the vote, and at the elimination ceremony, she tries showing Priya before the vote commences, but Chris proceeds to interrupt her, saying they must vote now, and there's no more room for discussion. The votes come out as 3-1, and Millie is sent home. However, before she leaves, she finally shows the last page of her notebook to Priya. Priya reads it and is touched by the sentiment enough so that their friendship is restored. The two end on good terms. I also want to add, just in case anyone cares, that Millie does still get eliminated even if she and Priya make up before the vote. Bowie and Ripper can't vote for Priya, so Millie is a guarantee. If Millie and Priya vote Ripper, he survives for having 3 immunities, and if they vote Bowie, both Bowie and Millie have 1 immunity, so there ends up being a tiebreaker challenge, which in most cases Bowie would win. So Millie is stuck in 4th place. Each finalist had 1 confessional before the finale. Priya's confessional is her talking about how extra motivated she is to win, not only because she's against Bowie and Ripper, but because she and Millie made up the last ceremony. She has a bit more to fight for now, and she's ready to take what she fought so hard for. Ripper's is his confidence getting in his head that he won the most immunities and survived to the finale despite not being the best perceived. He admits he's had his ups and his downs, referring to MK specifically, but he didn't doubt that he'd make it to this point. Bowie's confessional is him talking about how he played the game and did all that he had to do to make it to this point. He may not have made the best decisions morally, but he came to win the crown, and that's what he's going to do. As you can see on the screen, the randomized pairs have been chosen. Bowie gets Emma because they're still good friends, but Emma has obviously changed now that she ended the show without being with Chase. Priya gets MK for obvious reasons, and Ripper gets Axel also for obvious reasons. During the challenge, Emma is noticeably trying extra hard, which Bowie questions. Emma deflects at first, but despite Bowie not making any effort to pry the information out of her, she snaps anyways. She lets out her frustration over wasting her time with Chase and then getting eliminated because of Ripper. She's trying her absolute hardest because the last thing she wants is for Ripper to win. She tells Bowie to focus so they can prevent that. Bowie is liking the adrenaline coming from the other blonde, and the two speed up the process. Priya is also trying extra hard to the point where MK keeps bumping into the tree. MK tries talking to Priya, only to no avail. She has a confessional wondering what happened to her, as she was never someone that liked small talk, but right now she's thinking it's better than Priya's rage fest. Priya also lets out her frustrations on MK. She goes off about how despite forgiving Millie, she can't forget what she wrote in the notebook, and on top of that she can't forgive Bowie for trying to ruin her friendship, Ripper for treating her poorly in general, and especially MK for being a liar and a thief. She continues on with the challenge, and MK does as well, though less willing and more guilty. Ripper spends the first challenge trying to flaunt his quote-unquote confidence in an attempt to make MK jealous. Axel eventually grows annoyed by this and snaps at him because it's obvious MK doesn't feel anything for him, except for guilt because he's so pathetic and she led him on. Ripper breaks down, admitting he's not actually over her and wishes he was the right guy for her. Axel isn't good with comforting people, so she does what she knows how to do and slaps him in the face, telling him she doesn't want him to be the right guy, and he'd benefit from locking in and forgetting about her. Axel tells him he's embarrassing himself on live television, and if he wants to be seen as the macho alpha male he claims to be, he needs to act like it. Ripper begins to calm down and sets himself straight, as Axel does have a point. He does ask her why she's so insistent on helping him. Axel uses the excuse that she's literally his helper, and she doesn't want Bowie or Priya to win. Ripper is shocked she indirectly said that she's rooting for him, but doesn't press further on the topic. When the finalists reach the lake, Priya would be in the lead, while Bowie and Ripper battle in the background to not get 3rd place. Since Priya's raft isn't tampered with, it's solely a race between the 3 to the end. And to be honest, I think the final two remain the same. Bowie and Priya have proven themselves to have more physical capabilities that grant them the win, and in canon, they literally pole vaulted to the finish line, so Ripper is doomed regardless. Ripper is devastated to have lost the way he did, but he is soon approached by MK. He refuses to acknowledge her, but everyone is shocked when MK apologizes to Ripper for letting him believe she was into him for so long, admitting she realizes she took the wrong method to secure safety. Ripper easily forgives her, and the two are at least on good terms now. The outcome of the final two is exactly the same. Despite the experience changes, the two are still at the same amount of power here as they were in canon, so Priya still wins, and Bowie still gets second. And that has been this What If. What are your thoughts? Do you think it's accurate? Do you like the outcome? Is the elimination order good? Would you watch this if it were the actual season? Once again, if you want your own What If video, or if you want a personal fanfic via Google Doc, check out my Patreon. The link is in the description. That's all for this video. I'll see you next time.